next speaker, I am super excited to introduce her. I got to know her, I don't know, like 5, 6 years ago. Tiffany Apczynski actually started off as a journalist or as a reporter in the Tenderloin in San Francisco, and then went on to join, at a very early stage, a company that you may have heard of, Zendesk. And what's cool about Zendesk is that not only is it a company that is oriented around customer service and its product, it laces the notion and the concept of service into its entire HR kind of recruitment and company culture. And Zendesk employees and leadership are some of the most civically engaged and active members in the San Francisco community, tech community. So here today, she's going to talk about how to operationalize that empathy into your company and into your customer-facing teams.
Good afternoon. Hello. That is such a long walk. It's so uncomfortable. But yes, and it's so great to see Kim here. This was a pleasant surprise. Again, my name is Tiffany Apczynski. I work at Zendesk. We are a customer support software company that is headquartered in San Francisco. I have been with the company for the last 8 years, which is a really long time. You see a lot of things because the company's been around approximately 10 years. So I've watched us move from 30 employees to more than 2,000. I've watched us go from simply taking our customers from just using email to manage their customer support relationships to using Twitter and Snapchat, and as of last week, WhatsApp. I've seen us go from a small suite that we shared with another tech company to having 16 offices around the globe. And so it's been a really, really exciting journey watching us grow and watching what we've needed to change and do as we've grown. And what's interesting in our case when we talk about scaling our businesses, when we talk about using technology to scale our customer relationships, for Zendesk specifically, but this is going to apply to any company that needs to maintain these authentic and human relationships with their customers, is it's super challenging to go from your startup days and maintain those kinds of relationships you have with your customers when you suddenly have to move and automate a lot of those processes, when you have to pull AI and machine learning and predictive analytics and all of these things that start to separate you a little bit from your customers. And so in our case, I remember when we could fit all of our customers in a bar, and that was how we maintained our relationships with them. We'd throw something up on Eventbrite and they'd meet us somewhere. Or when they had a milestone with us, we could send them a cake, and we could do all these really personalized things. Because what was a major disruptor for Zendesk was we were saying, you don't have to have your customer support feel like this unfeeling robotic thing. Like, the major disruptor for us has been empathy. That we're going to give you a product that on the agent end is really nice to use. It feels a lot like their B2C products that they use. And on the customer end, they're going to feel like even if you're using an automated response to reach out to them on a complicated problem, it feels like an actual person took the time to write that response and send it to them. So that was a big challenge for us as we grew from 1,000 customers to now 125,000 customers. We've had to innovate our product to keep that same mom and pop shop feel that we promised our customers when we first founded, suddenly having to use a lot of tools and innovation to maintain that, even as we've been taking humans more and more out of that process. And I think all of us can relate to that on a personal level as well, where tech is more and more, it's so ubiquitous in our lives, right? And it's more and more becoming the way that we communicate efficiently and how we scale communications and how we use it to handle very complicated, emotional, and nuanced things. And so while I expected this slide to be a title slide for a while, spoiler alert, my next point is, though, that despite tech's ability to galvanize us, it also has a tremendous ability to polarize us. And I think we know on a personal level that that is true. I mean, think of your Facebook accounts, think of your Twitter accounts. It can polarize us. It can bring us together, but it can tear us apart. And even in our day-to-day, like our emails and our texts, like think of the misfires and miscommunications that happen over these channels that we are so dependent on, however, to communicate solutions, especially when we think of our customers. To communicate, many of our customers want to be using chat and really shortened forms of communication to have very complicated problems solved. Yet tech at the same time can polarize us if tone is misused, if the time in between responses is misused. So tech can polarize us. So that's anecdotally, but we also know this because trust has been on a steady decline for the last 10 years. And so this comes from Edelman. They're a wonderful market research firm, great think tank. And every year they issue what is called their trust barometer. It's a global survey of consumers. And they were surveying them on trust levels across 4 major institutions. And that's the media, it's government, it's business, and it's nonprofits. And over the last 10 years, trust has been slowly declining. Last year, Edelman declared it as the year trust was in crisis. And 2018 became the year that there was a battle for truth and there was no recovery in trust. And what's interesting when you think about that over the last 10 decades, we've watched trust go down, is that's right around the same time the iPhone came out. And so when we stopped doing this with one another and started doing this more is when there became this sort of resistance to trusting the information we were getting more. On top of that, there's fears around automation kind of driving this mistrust. And this is a slide from McKinsey, who's estimating that by its midpoint, by the year 2030, close to 400 million jobs could be automated. So we know that tech is so critical to how we run our lives. It's critical to how we're going to grow our businesses. It's the industry that we are in, but there's a lot of fears on the consumer side, on the customer side, on the user side as to what its impacts are. You know, and one thing that happens at Zendesk is we get really used to our bubble. We're headquartered in Silicon Valley. And we find that this mistrust can happen in the middle of the United States where getting people just accustomed to trust the cloud is an issue. So we can't take it for granted that while everyone here is very, comfortable with technology, that we still have a huge market of future customers that are still getting the way there. So all of these are kind of feeding into this mistrust and this polarization. So we're at an interesting crossroads. We're at this crossroads where we want to take humans out of the process more. We want to start relying on automation. We want to rely on AI and machine learning to move things along faster. Yet when you look at how consumers are feeling about trust, how they feel about polarization in tech, they're asking for the processes to feel more human. I want more tech, less human, but I want more of that tech to feel human. It's a really interesting crossroads to be at. And when we look at what that means for customer service, which is our bread and butter, we tie that back to how do we figure out a way to use our software and all of the features around it to communicate, hey, you can still trust us. We can service you and we have this human connection. We can be the company that you want us to be. And so it's a really interesting crossroads for many of us to be at. And also driving this, also driving this is this idea of being now in the empathy economy. That's sort of the midpoint this takes us to. And the idea of the empathy economy is it's the differentiator. It's what differentiates us as humans. It's what keeps us separate from the machines, is we know how to be empathetic. We know that. And we can tell when someone is being empathetic and when they're not. We're very good at detecting authenticity. And when we talk about the empathy economy, we're looking for this balance, this new currency that can thread itself through this new automated world that we're living in, that can be that bridge between us and the screens. And so one thing that's very interesting for our software company is we have support agents who will never meet the person that they're servicing for years on the other side of the screen. And so we need empathy to be that bridge between those two worlds. And also who we see driving this idea of the empathy economy are our millennials. And millennials are hugely powerful, one of the most powerful demographics to pay attention to. And across the board, millennials are choosing where they want to work, what kind of products and services they want to buy, who they want to invest in, according to shared values. Does this company feel like it's being real with me? Is their track record clean? Do they feel empathetic to the world around them? And in the United States, millennials are a quarter of our population. They represent more than $2 trillion in spending. And those numbers, that demographic, it mirrors across the world. So you'll find that in nearly every country, it's the millennial demographic that is becoming the largest and most powerful. And what our millennials are telling us is there's no kind of work-life divide anymore. It's a work-life blend. And I want to be with a company and drive the success of a company that shares those personal beliefs with me. Those blend now. And so what we've learned at Zendesk is what guides us through this transition is corporate social responsibility. Corporate social responsibility has had a terrible reputation for years. It's seen as something that you do once a year, you take a photo of yourself, you put it in your newsletter, and you call it a day. Or it's something that you turn to when you did something really bad that maybe polluted an entire body of water or really screwed over your customers. That's how you get it back. And we don't see it that way anymore. We feel like CSR has gone through an identity crisis, and what we can gain from it now is to see it as a vehicle, as a professional development tool to imbue empathy into more of your business processes. That CSR can be how you operationalize empathy, not only into your products, but into your culture. So again, at our company, we've believed in this for a very long time. As Kim mentioned earlier, we're located in the Tenderloin. That's where our headquarters are. We have 4 buildings there now. It is the poorest and most diverse neighborhood in San Francisco. And that became a really great opportunity for us to not be able to ignore how we could give back. So our neighborhood became our reason for sort of going on this journey. And we started that journey when we were about 60 employees, and as you can see, it's grown quite a bit. We're very proud of it. And more than this slide being a humble brag, what I hope you take away from it is we've been able to drive this idea of empathy into our culture. And your culture is what your customers will respond to, and culture is important to all of our companies. Culture is our recruiting, it's our retention, but it's also how we grow our brand and how we communicate to our customers. And the importance of operationalizing corporate social responsibility into your companies is your customer-facing employees become the ambassadors of that culture. So I run corporate social responsibility at Zendesk. I rarely meet our customers. But in driving this into our culture, our support agents and our sales team, who interact with our customers often the first time and the most times, build that trust, build that authenticity, because we've operationalized empathy into our culture by way of having a strong corporate social responsibility program. And where we really saw this take hold was anecdotally, we started to hear how our customer support agents were our top volunteers. And our customer support agents had very high ratings for how customers were saying they felt served by them. And so we started to think, well, this is interesting. Our most engaged organization within Zendesk are our customer support agents. And we have some of the highest CSAT numbers, customer satisfaction numbers, in the industry. Are there positive correlations here? And so last year, we hired a professor from Drexel University in Philadelphia, and we had him survey our support agents globally. We had him do focus groups to see what were the correlations there. And he found that they impacted these 3 areas. Help-seeking behaviors were improved by 15% when employees went out into the community every other month, volunteering a couple hours. So we're looking at maybe 6 hours a year. That's all it took for help-seeking behaviors across our customer service team to increase. And this is the most critical skill we need as a customer support company, because your help-seeking behaviors means the employee's just doing that. When they don't have the answer, they go and find it. They go and ask people they might not normally mix with. They'll go to their product team because they've met them at a volunteer engagement. They've met them outside of their siloed part of the org. They're motivated to be more educated. They're motivated to have the answers they need to help the customers that they, are on the line with every day. We also saw that by volunteering once every other month, support agents who did this were 3 times more likely to be rated in the top third of their peers. So empathy scoring is something we do internally. We look at tickets. We want to see what was the tone. Did that feel like you handled that in the correct way? Was this a super crisis situation where someone was freaking out? Did you handle it the right way? And again, we could see our top volunteers who are in the support org were also rated in the top third of their peers for empathy. And finally, we saw that it created a lot of pride in community. That is a typo I wish we had fixed. And why this was important is creating this pride in community as you scale is really important when you're trying to keep morale and the integrity of your work strong if employers are not in headquarters. So we have a major support hub in Madison, Wisconsin. We have a major support hub in Manila, as well as Dublin. They're not in headquarters. And so knowing that offering this type of programming created this sense of pride in their community meant that we didn't have to worry as much about them not being tied to headquarters. And where we really saw that is nationally, the attrition rate, the voluntary attrition rate for support agents is 29%, and at Zendesk it's 9%. So that's where we really saw the proof in that there. And I'm out of time, they're flashing a 0. But one thing I will say, I have 2 slides left, is one thing that you can do today that we found really easy is we launched a catchy campaign in Q1 of this year. We called it 6 hours. That's all we're asking our global employee base to volunteer this year, 6 hours. And then we're going to cross-reference that with some of the scoring techniques I mentioned before. We're going to see how that impacts performance reviews. We're going to see how that impacts promotions, et cetera, really digging into this. But 6 hours is what we're saying is all we need to ask our global workforce to do, which for us will mean 12,000 hours cumulatively in our communities. And so if you want to join that with us in that last graph, sorry, I'm out of time and getting a little distracted, but we saw a spike of 350% in engagement between Q1 2017 and Q1 in 2018 just by simply taking this large concept of empathy and volunteering and boiling it down to 6 hours. So you are welcome to join us on that. We have a handy hashtag. If you decide to take this goal to your companies, we'd love to hear from you. We'd love to hear your successes. We'll retweet you back. Thank you very much for your time today and enjoy the rest of your conference.
I need some traction. You need some traction. Let's get some traction.